Welcome to the Care Talks Rubbish podcast. This is for you if you care about the environment, want to be a change maker, or want to live a balanced and sustainable life. I'm your host, Claire Osborne, and I'm a coach and ocean advocate. I quit my corporate job 3 years ago after watching my mum fighting for her life. And I realised that life's too short to allow fear to hold you back. And by changing my mindset, I could follow my passion to help people and the planet. And I've been hugely inspired by everyday people following their passion, making a living and helping the planet at the same time. I wanted to learn more, so I decided to share these conversations with you. There's no better time than now to make a difference, and I believe that together we can create a wave of change. In this episode, I talked to Paul White, who's one of 4 friends who were watching the David Attenborough Blue Planet programme and then decided that they had to do something. So they pulled all of their knowledge together, their knowledge being of marketing, branding and online business, and especially farming and agriculture. And they created the Modern Milkman. And I was fascinated to talk to Paul about what it was that made them take action, where there are so many people who might be listening who are thinking, oh, you know, I'm aware of the issues, but they're not doing something. So it really interests me what it is about those people who go the next step and actually create a difference. And he has some really inspiring tips and advice. So if you're sitting there listening, thinking you've got an idea, but you're not sure how to start or how to create action, then I hope that this episode might inspire you to do so. Yeah, I'm here with Paul White, and he's one of 4 friends who, after watching the Blue Planet Attenborough programme, just decided that he needed to do something in order to reduce single-use plastic, and so the Modern Milkman was born.
It was.
So I'm really curious. Lots of people watched that programme and they didn't then go off and set up a business. So how exactly did that come about?
So I guess I've been sort of environmentally conscious forever. And I'm really into David Attenborough. Everybody is. He's like the godfather of the nation. And I was watching the programme and I ran a marketing company. I'd worked with Simon and Becky previously, and Tom, the third friend, was my business partner in the marketing programme. And we were all just at a natural point in, I guess, life where we were looking for an extra little challenge. And I watched it. I was just like led out on the settee at home. And I thought, this is going to really, really resonate with people. This is the first thing that's going to make people properly think about plastic. And we've sort of followed consumer trends in what we do in marketing and things like that. And we know that people don't necessarily want to be buying from big supermarkets anymore. I think people recognise that doesn't necessarily support farming or farmers properly. The prices are dictated by a supermarket, and we're all from a rural background, so we understood that very well. And I'd sort of been noticing that people were starting to buy more glass bottled milk. So I talked to Tom about it, and Tom and I talked about it, but we were that busy at work, we just talked about it. This was only over a period of a couple of weeks, but we were like, we have to do this. I think it's an incredible idea. We sat down with Simon and Becky in the pub, and Simon's run high growth startups before, and he was like, well, first of all, he said, I'm not sure how that'll work. Give me the weekend, give me some figures. Went away and looked at it and came back and said, yeah, this could definitely work, because it has to be something that works to be long-term sustainable. And so I borrowed a couple of grand off my mum and dad, and we went and bought a milk ground in our own village, which was 100 houses. And we started getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we had a little paper book which said what Mrs. Brown had on which day. And we set off delivering her milk, and we'd finish work at about 7:30, and then we'd go to our real jobs. And that's sort of how it all started. And then we'd get to the end of the week and we'd look who owed what money, and then we'd go and knock on the doors and they wouldn't be in. And then we'd go and knock on the doors again and they still wouldn't be in. And after 4 times, we thought we've lost all of the profit out of this. It's a really good idea, but this clearly just does not work like this. It's certainly we'd bought a lot of traditional milk round customers, some older generation who'd had a milkman forever, and we thought there's definitely an appetite for this with younger people, but they aren't going to be faffing around, waiting for somebody to knock on the door, leaving a note out that's going to get eaten by rats or soggy, saying, please no milk today. It has to be ultra convenient for a new generation of people to use it. So we've never done it before, but we built an app, and people now order the milk on the app. They pay for it when they order it, so there's no us traipsing around hundreds of houses in the soaking wet, trying to get them to dish out £1.80 or whatever for the milk. So that's how it was born, and it's absolutely amazed me. I mean, there's 6,000 customers now, and we bought 100.
Wow! How quickly have you grown to 6,000?
We bought the original truck, and I wish we'd kept it, because hopefully one day we'll have like a museum of milk. This truck could have been in it, but we don't. So at some point we're going to have to pay a fortune to buy this knackered old truck back for our own. So we bought that truck about 12 months ago, and we did like the testing phase around home basically until about May this year. And in May this year we got a little bit of seed funding, and so the growth has come since May. And we now operate across Lancashire, Greater Manchester and Leeds.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What was it exactly about the Attenborough programme that resonated with you?
I think the thing that struck for everybody was that baby whale. That was and I knew how much of an impact it had because the day after, everybody was in tears, but the day after, the world was talking about it. And it's just triggered something in people's minds where people are now pretty well obsessed with cutting down their plastic use, even if it's subconsciously, even if they're not some sort of plastic warrior like we might be. People are consciously making that decision, I think. And there have been subsequent programs like Human Anita's War on Plastic, which we know the day after that goes out, we see a huge spike in people searching for us. So we know that people are making this conscious decision.
So there'll be lots of people who have ideas like that, I'm going to do something, I'm going to go and set up something, but they don't. So what is it that sets you aside? How come you guys have put it into action?
I don't know. Well, I think several things. We really care about the farming environment. And we've all worked, my degree's in agriculture. So we all really understand and want people to buy local. And so the model that we have is it's unique anyway, but in each local area, so each principality, if you will, we source all of the products locally to that area. So rather than us just buying a load of milk from a dairy and warehousing it and shipping it out to our sites, the milk in Leeds comes from Yorkshire, and it comes from within 20 miles of where people's homes are. The breakfast cereals are made on a sheep farm in Yorkshire and packaged in wood starch. And so each area, so that's where the local farming, I could go and see the cows this afternoon if I wanted, and tonight they'll be milked and it'll be in the glass bottles. So it was about supporting the local farmers, and that we all have previously worked together for a farm shop company, so we really understood sourcing local products. It's a very quick way, and I guess maybe we'll get into this a little bit later on. There's a danger that just jumping on being plastic free isn't always better, and there is this big rush. I've been and met and had meetings with the Mayor of Greater Manchester staff, who's doing plastic free Greater Manchester, and they were the ones that really made me sit up about it, because I was like, we've got this and it's plastic free, and everything we do is plastic free. If it can't be plastic free, we don't stock it. But they said they've seen a big rush of everybody just to ditch plastic, and quite often are picking up worse alternatives.
Yeah. So like things like paper. Paper has 3 times the ecological footprint to plastic.
Yeah, yeah.
And then also, I guess, in some ways, glass, if it's traveling long distance,
Yeah,
has a much larger carbon footprint.
yeah.
And that's where your local.
Yeah, it's local, and also to be more economical than plastic, it needs to have about 20 uses, and ours has about 50. So we know that, and ultimately, at the end of the process, glass is much more often recycled than plastic is. So ultimately, glass is melted down and made back into glass, whereas people tend not to recycle plastic, and the problem that we have in this country is that each local authority area is so differently set up for recycling plastic. It really ought to be a function that the government dictates about what you recycle and what you don't recycle, because it's so different everywhere that people in general just don't bother doing it. Um,
Yeah, it's really, yeah, and I've like from personal experience, when I've done paddle trips, I did a paddle trip a couple of years ago, the length of Wales, and we paddled through various different local authorities,
mhm.
and each different local authority recycled things differently,
Yeah, yeah,
and wanted things in a different way, which just makes it really difficult. But it's not only that, as you know, I'm sure, plastics a plastic bottle isn't generally recycled into another plastic bottle. It's normally downcycled into a lesser plastic.
yeah, yeah.
So you must have gone on a bit of a learning curve from that day on the sofa, thinking, "Let's do
Yeah.
this."
Because on that day, I guess on that day I was just a normal consumer who went to the supermarket and bought stuff probably without thinking about the impact of it. And now I have to, well, I, that's the whole thing made me think about the impact of it. But now I have to practice what I preach as well. And it's difficult. I'm not completely plastic free because the world isn't set up for it yet. And I think we're quite away from that. But it's about making the conscious decisions. I went to a supermarket the other day and it said, I've forgotten what it said, but I took a picture of it and I tweeted it and it got quite a bit of traction. And it said that their fruit and veg aisle was now plastic free. And I've forgotten what it said. We now don't use plastic bags. And then everything was still in plastic cellophane, but they
Mm,
weren't classing that as plastic bag. The loose stuff just wasn't in plastic bags. And it
yeah,
was like a bit of a con, really. And I
yeah.
looked at the bag that was there. I wonder how much energy this bag's taken to produce. And then I saw somebody tweet yesterday that it was cheaper to buy 3 peppers than if you worked out the price of 1 pepper in a packet of 3 in plastic, it was cheaper than buying the one on its own where you didn't have to use plastic. So there's a long way to go. One of the biggest challenges I get, because what we've done now is we want to, it's not just about, although it's called the Modern Milkman, it's not just about being a modern milkman. It's now, whilst we set off just being plastic free, it's about us being the most sustainable grocery delivery service in the UK. So that is in terms of reducing food miles, reducing food waste. And that's one of the great things about it, because people are almost live ordering. They're ordering what they need. So we deliver to people's homes 3 times a week. And they're all on a round. And I'll come on to the technology we've used for the round in a short while. But they're all on a round. So you're ordering what you need tomorrow. So you know what you need tomorrow. On Monday, you don't know what you need on Saturday, so you're ordering too much. So there's a reduction in the food waste. There's supporting the local economy where it comes from, and there's the reducing plastic. So over time, it started ticking more boxes. But the biggest challenge that we've had is finding the products, because we want to stock a big product range, and we do all sorts of stuff now, like baked goods. We do washing up liquid in glass bottles, and you leave the washing up liquid bottle out, and we pick up the bottle. So it's all about the closed loop cycle, and we pick it all up again. But we've had to do so we'll see a product that we like. So we went to Yorkshire Show and we saw some breakfast cereals that we liked, and went to those guys, and it was packaged in plastic. and the producers are nowhere near far enough on, particularly at a smaller level, to be moving away from plastic. So in effect, we have to then come up with the solution for them and say, this is what you will provide this to us in. We've found where you can get it from. We have to do the legwork. That's something that we've learned pretty quick, that if we want to have a range, we're going to have to do the work ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's good because it gives us the surety of how economical it is. So we do tea bags, and of course most household brands of tea bags contain plastic. So we do tea bags in a tin. You get the tin dropped off at your house, and then you leave the tin out when it's empty. We refill the tin. We don't refill it on the doorstep. We take the tin away and leave you a new full tin. But where we got those from, they didn't do that. So we've had to sort of develop that. But hopefully it's getting producers now to think about, actually, it's not as difficult as we think to do this closed loop thing. There are alternatives around, such as bioplastics, which may not be perfect, but they're a huge step in the right direction. There's obviously an additional cost to a lot of it, and I think we're at the stage where a lot of consumers are willing to pay the small additional cost that there is, because they know that they're doing their bit for the environment. But the additional cost isn't as great as people might think it is. I mean, a pint of milk from us is, I think, 65p. And from that, the farmer's getting probably double the amount they would get from a supermarket. So that's creating a sustainable industry. The packaging is being used 50 times. So it's really working. And this whole opening it up to a new generation has worked. I guess the way I always describe it is, it's the Instagram generation. The people who've never had doorstep milk delivered that we're aimed at, and the people who are probably more environmentally conscious. And yeah, it's another thing. So the technology we've developed, the front end technology where you do sort of the live ordering, that feeds then into the cab of each van, and that then maps the route on the most economical route that person can do. So it goes right down to that level. Of course, it's handy for us. The traditional milkman would have to remember every house he was delivering to and what they had. Ours just presses start, and it's like going on holiday to Wales. You just follow.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's there. So yeah, it's really it's been quite a journey. It's been quite a quick journey, but it seems to be working, and there's no sign of it slowing down at all.
And you're stocking oat milk as well. Are you the only people that are stocking?
So we're not. There is I guess it's not a tiny company. I would call it a boutique company in London that does it, and they just do oat milk.
Okay.
So we're the only, I guess, milkman that's stocking glass bottled oat milk. We were out with a journalist last week. He didn't tell us till the end of the recording, but he was vegan. And he said, when he's starting, are you going to start looking at oat milk? And we said, we've just developed it. And he said he moved away from dairy milk it was an environmentally conscious decision for him. But then he was buying milk, and I think it's flown in from Switzerland or Sweden, I can't remember. But it was produced in Sweden and flown over here, and he said he couldn't find anywhere that was doing oat milk that was produced in this country. So ours is produced just outside Lancaster, there's this funny thing about local, isn't there, where everybody thinks it's got to travel less than 2 miles to the door. And it's about just using the most local producer who can do what you do. It tastes amazing. I mean, I'm a dairy drinker all day long, but I had some oat milk on my oat porridge from We Also Start, and it was the best porridge I've ever had in my life. Like, I would only have oat milk on porridge now.
Yeah, I drink oat milk. I'm not vegan, but I drink mostly dairy alternatives.
Hey.
And it drives me up the bend that I then end up with a whole stack of Tetra Paks. And also the pointless additional plastic top that is now on Tetra Paks, because I am of the generation when I was a kid, there were milkmen, and it was the old school style where you kind of left a note to say no milk today, please.
Yeah.
So I also remember the days where Tetra Paks didn't have those plastic lids, and I wrote to the oat milk brands at one point and got no response. Especially the brand that has all over its packet about how it's all for the environment.
Yeah.
So
It's absolutely crazy to me because, and I don't know whether this is stereotyping, but the kind of, I would think, and this is not evidence-backed at all, but I would think the kind of people that are drinking dairy alternatives are more likely to be more environmentally conscious.
yeah, I think
Just
so.
by nature.
Yeah.
And they're not being given the opportunity to have their product packaged in a more environmentally friendly way. And we've proven you can do it with the glass. To begin with, we were concerned about how the product would look because, of course, it's in Tetra Pak because often it separates and doesn't look particularly appetizing. It came and it looked no different to milk. It didn't separate. It tasted absolutely amazing. So what we've done with that is we've tested it on our current customers, which may sound absolutely mental that we've just tested it on basically a load of dairy addicts, but they've absolutely loved it. We've sold quite a lot of it, and we've tested it on them, and then we now go to them for feedback and say, how would you improve it? And then we roll it out because I want us to be able to offer a full vegan range where people can have oat milk and all our cereals are vegan. Or we're now doing baked goods that are vegan. So it'd be nice for there to be the full range, really. And yeah, it seems to have gone down really well. I really like it. So if I really like it, it'll stay. Yeah, and I just can't believe that. I just can't believe that nobody's done it before properly.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So what in your sort of journey from your sofa to where you are today? I only say your sofa because that's where you said you were when you were watching Attenborough and Blue Planet. What kind of hurdles have you come across on this journey, and how have you overcome them?
So the biggest, well, one of them is getting people who want to get up and deliver in the pitch black throughout the night in the freezing cold. And I can fully understand that because it was horrific last winter. I mean, the van that we had, the driver's window didn't go up. It was like the worst looking. So it was freezing. It was, yeah. So finding people who want to do that. Although we're finding quite a young generation do want to do it. And you're getting quite a generation, I guess, of milkmen who realise the impact it's having on the environment. Definitely the biggest barrier is the producers and the product and getting the product into the right packaging so we can supply it. So we're just doing some work at the moment around meat. We want to deliver meat to people's doors, not on a huge scale, although we are doing Christmas turkeys, but we're not like a roast joint or anything like that, but basically breakfast goods. And that's all packaged in plastic. So we've been doing quite a lot of work on packaging around how we package that in an environmentally friendly paper. But that's taken quite a lot of development, really. That's probably the one that's taken the most. Usually we can find an off-the-shelf solution for a producer and say, there you go, put it in that and we'll buy it. But I'd say that's been a pretty big hurdle. The easiest thing of everything has been finding the customers. Okay. Because I've marketed lots of things and none as easy as this. It's people are ready, people get it, and it might be an example of perfect timing, but the world knows, and it's everywhere, isn't it? The whole environmentally conscious thing is absolutely everywhere. So that's been by far, I would say, the easiest thing. In the beginning, one of the hardest things was just delivering the milk. getting up in the morning, and of course we started off with no technology, but we set up a Facebook page and started saying, well, we've got 100 customers, do you want to buy your milk? And we basically set them up on a direct debit, which was a nightmare to administer. So we were literally sat in the office manually sorting people's direct debits, so we didn't have to collect the cash. And then if somebody went on holiday, we had to refund that bit of their order for that week. And it was all done and then all of the orders were done on a spreadsheet. So you sat in the front of this van at 3 o'clock in the morning in freezing cold with a spreadsheet, which we were trying to hide. We were trying to print in certain colours so that you could see it in the dark better. So there were quite a few mistakes in the beginning because it relied on a lot of you reading things right at 3 o'clock in the morning with your eyes half shut in the dark in a rush. So it was a huge relief when we actually went to the tech-based system.
That's interesting what you said about there were a lot of mistakes at the beginning, and I think fear of making mistakes or getting things wrong is the thing that quite often stops people from doing things. So would you say that you are the kind of person that isn't afraid of getting things wrong?
People might call it irresponsible. I'm definitely like that. What's really good is the four of us who work together, we understand each other inside out. We've known each other for years. And within that, there are different personalities. There are people who question everything. And it's funny because I guess I adapt my personality depending on who I'm dealing with. And I did some psychometric testing not that long ago, and they said that this is the kind of person that you are. So if I'm dealing with somebody who's almost more willing to give it a go than I am, I will adopt the polar opposite and question everything. But if that person's not in the room, then I am that person, and I am relying on somebody else to question me. And say, so because there's four different personalities, I guess it's very difficult. I guess it's wrong to say this, but it's almost very difficult to make a mistake because it's not one decision.
Yeah.
I hate working on my own anyway. I absolutely hate it. I'm not good at it. I'm not organised enough to do it. I always need to work with somebody more organised than me. So the personalities we've got are just perfect. Tom looks after the ops, Simon oversees the whole company, Becky oversees customer service, and I oversee marketing. And that's where all of our strengths are. And Tom tells me what I need to do that week because I'm not organised enough to plan ahead. So he says, this is what the aim is for this week. And I guess that's the creative mind. I'm the creative person who comes up with really good ideas and then just has to follow them through.
Awesome. So clearly you work together as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to get to where you are, have you had mentors or advice?
Yeah, so I won an award last year, about 12 months ago. I was the Young Lancastrian of the Year.
Wow,
and,
well done.
With that, I've entered and had quite a few awards, and quite often they're just like a money-making thing where you enter the award, you pay a fortune to go to the awards, you get a trophy, and that's it. You put it in your Twitter bio, and then after 12 months you have to take it off. But this was a really useful award because with it there was a whole mentoring package. And so my mentor was a lady called Alison Chesworth, who owns with her husband a company called EKM, which is basically like the UK Shopify. And so she was the perfect mentor for me. And then I've got friends who run businesses and things like that, and I spend quite a lot of time talking to them. So every night I go walking with Amanda, who's a neighbour who lives across the road from me. She's a chief exec, and I can talk to her about anything, and she'll give me advice. So yeah, I tend to want to take a lot of advice rather than too little. I guess for my own reassurance, because I guess by nature I am that person who could run headlong into a car crash. I guess that's why, for my own reassurance, I like to take a lot of advice, and that works pretty well so far.
So what's the best advice you've ever had?
Oh, what a good question. It would probably be usually not to do something. So, well, I remember a guy who works locally who runs quite a big construction company. Just because I do have a tendency to do too much, and I sat down with him one day talking about a separate business that I was trying to get him, not that I was involved in, but I was trying to get him to help out with. And he said to me, all I can do well is build houses. There is no point me getting involved with, the last thing you would want is me involved with that, because it will fail if I'm involved with it. And I guess the best advice I've had is to stick to what you know. So even though I didn't know, I guess, the plastic-free world, we'd all come from a background of running farm shop, and it was quite a large online farm shop as well. So we'd all come from that back. So we knew, and my degree's in agriculture, so I know that side of it. Marketing is the bit I look after. Marketing is my background. I still have a marketing agency as well. So, and I guess it's that stick to what you know thing. There's no point, if you know what you're good at, there's no point trying to find out what else you're good at. Just do more of the same.
I think that is really good advice.
Yeah.
And I
straying off.
I also you said that you have a tendency to do too much.
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, what's your strategy for trying to rein that in?
So until this year, until this year really, I didn't rein it in, and I was pretty good at functioning just on adrenaline. And I could do 4 hours sleep a night and just go hell for leather, and it almost all nearly fell over. I was diagnosed with heart failure about 12 months ago. And that was a big wake-up call for me that actually I physically can't continue to do this much, because I was just too tired to do it. So there was a huge paring back. I used to be the leader of the local council, which was a full-time job in itself, and running the marketing agency, and we ran a bar, and we were doing music festivals. And so there's two strategies. One, to surround yourself with people who are better at everything than you. And I think I'm pretty good at that. So if I can just stand in the middle and direct the show, and I'm pretty. Sometimes I'm not so good at that. It takes a lot for me to give something over, but once I do it, it's the best thing I can ever do. But I guess always surround yourself with people who are better than you are, because then you should have very little to worry about. And then, this year for me, it was just it was a necessity to have to say no to some stuff, and it's been really good for me, because on the back of that, I've got more time at home. I've got my little chickens in the garden that I look after. I like taking the dog out for walks. And prior to that, it was getting in from work at 11:30 at night and leaving again at 6. And it's led to a whole lifestyle change for me, where I really, really enjoy going to work, really enjoy what we're doing. I feel at the moment with the Milkman, I feel like the luckiest person on the earth, that we're doing something for the farming community. We're doing something to help the environment, and I get to work with my 3 best friends, and we're brutally honest with each other. There's nothing we couldn't say to each other. The honesty is just amazing. I feel so lucky that if one of us needs picking up, we're all there. I feel like, and we all live in this same village and babysit each other's kids and all that sort of stuff. It's like, it sounds almost too good. It sounds too twee to be true, doesn't it?
I think it's just a testament that you can, as long as, if you know what it is that you want, then you can get it. So, do you goal set? Do you sort of set out, this is how I want to live my life, and then aim for that?
Yeah, and I guess I do. I do a little bit more in my personal life than I ever did. We did some sort of profiling about 12 months ago of how you spent your time, and mine was like all work, no home time. And I guess now I've set more personal goals, than I ever would. We have rigid goals within the business of what we need to hit in terms of units and stuff like that, as you would expect. But for the first time ever, I think I'm probably setting personal goals, and there's more that I want to do in terms of advocacy work, really. So for me, yes, the Modern Milkman's a business, but I want to be out there telling or showing producers that you can go plastic free, because I think there's just this, that'll be really hard work and let's not do it. So I want to do some advocacy work around that. I want to do more educate. I always think if I didn't do this, I'd be a teacher. So I want to do more around work in schools. And I guess this is a question for you, really. We want to have a real charitable element to what we're doing. And whether that's putting time back in or donating money. But what I'm conscious of is finding the right thing. Because, of course, we could just donate some money to a plastic-free charity or Surface for Sewage or somebody like that. But I think there's more that we could do than just chuck some money at something. So if you have any ideas, I'm tasked really with what can we do in a charitable sense to make this not just about a business but about a movement, really. And how can we educate kids? And of course, educating kids, the problem, well, not the problem is, I think the generation of children that are at school now are going to be pretty well educated on this subject. And I think the world will be an entirely different place when they're sat in places like we are. Whatever they're doing, they're going to have they're going to have this environmentally sensitive focus. So I'm not sure whether it's trying to find the right thing where we can have the maximum benefit without just doing something just so it looks like we do charity work.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. And there are a lot of people who are kind of tagging on an environmental message for the sake of marketing.
Yeah.
And it's great that you are actually kind of stopping to ask that real valid question of, where can you actually add real value somewhere? And kids are so inspiring. Through the outreach that I've done, I've met incredible young people like Amy and Ella Meek, who are the founders of Kids Against Plastic. And just, all sorts. And as for, I'm sure the Ocean's 8 ladies, there's 8 of us down here with such a breadth of knowledge and contacts. So offline, let's have a conversation about that and how we might be able to help you with that. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and if there's anybody listening to this who's got any ideas, but for me, because for me this goes beyond just a business idea. It needs to be something that is actually putting back, and that's something that since I've stopped saying yes to everything, that's something that I've struggled with the most, because I was leading the council. I was doing lots of voluntary charity work stuff, and leading the council was voluntary. 50% of my time was voluntary. And now I don't do any. I have this feeling of, actually, I thought it'd be fine to just have my own time, but now I feel like I'm not making a difference. Even though the business is, I feel for my own personal development, I feel like I want to be making a difference to the world around me. And at the moment, I don't feel like I am. And that's why it's got to be the right thing that we do. And you're absolutely right about this thing of people just tagging on for marketing purposes. I've forgotten, I wouldn't name a company even if I could remember it, but I was on a company's website the other day, and they sold tons and tons of plastic, and at the bottom they were partnered with a plastic-free charity. And I thought, well, the best thing you could do is not partner with that charity, to reduce the plastic that you're producing.
And this is the whole thing with I can't remember off the top of my head the exact phrase, like retailers' responsibility or whatever it is. And instead of paying to make sure that their products don't don't create unnecessary waste. They just stick some money in a pot and go, someone else can go and deal with my waste. Producer's responsibility or something it's called. But yeah.
Companies just doing doing the tokenism to look like they're making a difference. And this is, of course, where so much of the rushing just to do something to look like you're doing something goes back to the point about switching from plastic. The whole experience that McDonald's had with ditching a plastic straw which you could recycle and introducing a paper straw which you couldn't. That it's that knee-jerk.
And that in itself was an interesting media spin on what they were doing, because although technically plastic straws are recyclable, they're not.
Yeah.
So, and actually the paper straws will mulch down better than the plastic straws will. But and it goes to all of, I think this is a lot of the problem that people are facing, is that there isn't a silver bullet. There's no straightforward answer. So there are misguided but well-meaning solutions, like people switching to lots of bioplastics and things like that, which in some instances can be helpful if they are truly biodegradable. But in many instances, bioplastics just act in exactly the same way as plastic.
Yeah, and we've just, because of course we came into this knowing very little about plastic, really. I mean, I got an A level in environmental science, and that's as far as sort of my environmental understanding went. So it's been a learning journey for us, realizing even the difference between what biodegradable is, what home compostable is, and so when we've been looking for packaging solutions, we might originally, and we haven't ended up with any, but we might originally have thought, we'll just switch. And then when we've actually looked at it, we found out that biodegradable is just as bad. It's just breaking down into little pieces. Yeah. So if we have to use anything that resembles or that acts in the same way that plastic does, we absolutely stipulate that must be home compostable. And we make sure that there are certificates that prove that it's not going to harm the environment. It's important that people are just honest about this, rather than pretend to be everything that they're not. So one of the things that we're really honest about is we're operating in diesel vans at the moment, and that's because we realise that our journey to being the most sustainable grocery delivery service is a journey, and in 12 months to be the most would be pretty ridiculous. And there are some challenges, particularly with transport, that we have to overcome, particularly in East Lancashire. If we were to stick a load of electric vans on the road, it's very, very hilly here. So whilst it's a journey that we're going on, we're on it. So we test electric vans quite regularly for a van manufacturer, on our way to sort of trying to find one that works for us, because it would be absolute madness for us to just say, right, we'll have a fleet of electric vans and then them not complete the 8-hour shift. Yeah. Because the whole thing would fall over. And we are testing them. It's the reason we've gone for the make of van that we've gone for is because we believe that they'll be the first to do something that works for us. So then we can just switch what we're buying, basically, and it will fit in with the fleet without having to re-alter everything. So we're pretty honest with that. That's an area that needs some work, but the technology is not there. And I think with quite a lot of the sort of green credential stuff, one of the problems is that you might have people like us wanting to do things to improve the environment, but whether the technology is there to make it happen is another thing. And that's exactly the same with plastic, isn't it? That for a lot of things, the alternatives just aren't there at the moment. And so we're trying to develop alternatives, but we're never going to develop enough alternatives to fill a supermarket. That's going to be down to the manufacturers and the retailers themselves to do that.
with the push from the government with a bit of luck. And I guess one of the things that we recognise is obviously we set off realising that going plastic free was going to be a driver for people switching to us, but it's not always going to be a driver, because at some point this issue will have to be dealt with, and it will be dealt with, and then there will be, we can't rely on that being our point of difference and the only thing that makes us any better than anybody else. It's got to be about the all-round sustainability of where you buy things on. So that's something, I guess, that changed for us pretty early on. We were just all about, let's say we can save the world if we just get people to not use plastic, and then thought, actually, that's not what sustainability is. It's a much, much bigger piece. And hopefully, I mean, our goal, everybody listening to this, I think, will hope that we manage to deal with the plastic problem. And if we just relied on the plastic problem as the only reason people were coming to us, then in a couple of years' time, we'd have no business.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're doing what we can now, but at some point, people are going to catch up, aren't they? And what will be interesting is whether that catching up is we just do away with plastic, and I struggle to see how we will ever manage to do that. And I think all we look at the moment is how we do away with plastic, and if we put more time into looking at what happened at the other end, because if we're never going to do away with it completely, then we need to put a lot more time and thought into looking at how we deal with it once we've created it.
Yeah, and I think that really is key, and it is a complex issue, but and it's not really plastic free. We're never going to have a plastic free society, and in fact plastic's not really the enemy, because it is cheap, it is versatile, it is light, and in some ways it is more ecological to use than some other materials, and it is like pulling in and re-looking at things. So like if you look at the waste hierarchy, recycling is quite far down, and that's why your model works, because it's about reuse and refilling. And that is really the way that we need to move towards this kind of whole circular economy idea. And I've in one of my previous episodes, I've interviewed Claire Potter, who's a circular economy design expert, and her expertise is really about, she lectures at Sussex University, and her expertise is really about inspiring the next generation of product designers to start looking at products from the beginning. So when you're designing a product, you're thinking about where it's going to end up at the end after use, and that's really where we're moving.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So
on the circular economy stuff, I think, I absolutely agree, and that's of course what we're trying to design. Where I struggle to see how we square the circle, as it were, is how are supermarkets going to fit into that? Because are you going to get somebody like my mum walking into her local supermarket with 40 odd empty boxes and refilling them? And that's why I think probably our model works, where you're not going to have people dragging boxes around behind them everywhere. It's hard enough getting people to remember to take the shopping bags to the supermarket. But if you're just leaving them out and they're being taken away and refilled, I think the supermarkets are going to have to think hard about how they compete really in a circular economy world where people are going to be dragging boxes around everywhere with them, and of course, if that's what we move to, then it's much more convenient for people to have them picked up from their home and have the refilling done for them, rather than them having to go and refill the box as it was. But the circular economy stuff is so interesting, but it's so at the beginning of its life. I mean, well, it's really funny, isn't it? Because we're talking about something that in the 60s, 70s and 80s was massive and is coming back round. And so I'm sat here saying, oh, well, we're talking about something that's we're talking about something that's really new and nobody's really got the head around it. We're not. We're talking about scaling that's older than I am.
Yeah. And you know, your mum probably back in the day would have had her sort of bags, her produce bags that she would go and refill from the greengrocers and then pop to the bakery or whatever. So with all the sort of complexities of solutions that are being bandied around, there are a lot of people who get into this sort of state of overwhelm. And I don't know if you've heard of the term eco-anxiety, which seems to be being bandied around, and I think is actually a real thing. I was just wondering if you ever suffer from eco-anxiety, and what do you do for helping yourself deal with that kind of overwhelm?
So one of the biggest things that I suffer with is I absolutely worry about people seeing me buy something in plastic in the supermarket, because it's people round here know, well, particularly people in my hometown know that, and I don't think it's just me. I think it's all four of us that it's made us really nervous about buying plastic. I was going into a sandwich shop not that long ago, and on the way in there, I had my Modern Milkman jacket on, and a woman stopped me and said, "Oh, you're my milkman. I live at this address." And I'm not actually her milkman, but we had a conversation, and I thought, oh, God, if that had been 30 seconds later, I'd have gone into this shop and I would have probably had a sandwich that was wrapped in plastic in my hand. And so it's made me, and I guess some people would call me a hypocrite, but that was the only option available to me at the time. But it's me just running the company, not just because I want to do the best for the environment, but because I'm so conscious about the image. It's absolutely changed the way I shop, or not the way I shop, but what I buy. And there's things like toilet roll, for example, that in our local area, I can't think of anywhere where I could get it not in plastic. But when I'm at the till, whether I've got that milkman jacket on or not, I'm like, geez. And no matter how much shopping I've got, whether I've forgotten to take a bag with me or not, I carry it out in armfuls. Because
I do the same. And I think that is a common thing for people who are kind of plastic activists, for want of a better word. And I get exactly the same thing. And you can't be 100% plastic free all of the time. And there are occasions where I forget to say no for a straw and someone puts it in front of me, for example. And I'm like, oh no, someone's going to see me with a straw and take it out. And then I'm like, no, I might as well use it when now I've got it. And it also amuses me how people, my friends, will turn up with a plastic bag and then immediately start apologising for arriving at my house with a plastic bag. And you know, like, I'm not the plastic police. Everyone is trying, and as long as you're aware and you're trying, then that's fine.
So I guess that's the biggest thing that I notice. We've talked about it several times, trying to do sort of a documentary where the four of us, go totally plastic free for like a month. But when we think about it, it's almost impossible, isn't it? It's so much of a big part of our lives now. And you would, I mean, if you were doing it, you would have to plan it meticulously. You couldn't just set off and do it and say, right, well, from tomorrow, because whilst having, I guess if we all took a month off to do it and said, right, well, we'll start tomorrow, that'd be quite easy to do. But if we just tried to fit it in our everyday lives with no planning, it'd be absolute chaos.
Well, so then my challenge to you, I'm sure you've heard of Plastic Free July.
Yeah.
Well, you've got 7 months or 10 months to prepare. So
it's something we really want to do, because I think it's really useful for several reasons, really. One, it's really useful as a learning tool for ourselves in terms of, well, these are the options. It would help us to know what we could stock better, because we'd have to find it, because we'd have to survive. But I think it'd be quite an education, particularly if we recorded it and did it well, for the world to see how difficult it is and how much needs to change, really, for that to be. And of course, we've talked a lot about how it's going to be very difficult to go entirely plastic free, but and I think we shouldn't necessarily be. That's where the eco anxiety thing comes from, isn't it? People thinking that they have to not touch any plastic, and I think the first step is if we can get people to reduce it. And when I was walking around the supermarket last night, I just called in to grab some tea on the way home, which is the worst way to shop anyway, isn't it? Without planning. And I thought it'd be quite interesting to look back at, and it'd be impossible to do, but to look back at the kind of amount of plastic I used prior to having this idea and setting it up, and the kind of amount I use now, because almost the decision to cut down my plastic, although there are times like going into the sandwich shop where I think, geez, that was a close call. It's almost not a decision now. It's that ingrained in me that it's part of everyday life to take the least plastic option. So my plastic use must have reduced hugely compared to what it was, but I've no idea. I mean, I was probably bad before.
I've done the plastic free challenge. So in fact, right at the beginning of my journey in 2015, I did 2 months of single use plastic free, but with the proviso that I could use recyclable plastic at that time. And then this year I've done the plastic. I did plastic free July.
And do you not use any?
I think there are certain things. Let me think back now. I allowed myself to use Tetra Paks because I just don't have time to make my own oat milk. And there were 1 or 2 other things. I can't remember what they were now, but yeah, pretty much. Otherwise, that's it. So protein is really hard because I eat meat, but not very often. So actually, if I ate more meat, it would be when I did it before, I went into a butcher with paper and it was easier. But this time I wasn't eating much meat, and I can't find much tofu or any of that kind of stuff that isn't in plastic or Tetra Pak or something. So it is tricky. And actually, someone else who I've interviewed, Harriet, who set up a shop down here in Brighton, a plastic-free shop, Harriet's of Hove. One of the reasons why she started off on that journey was from trying to go plastic-free and realising just how difficult it is. So I'm going to wrap up soon. Before I do so, there are lots of kind of activists out there, and I've spoken to lots of people who have projects who are doing something about plastic. And one thing I've noticed is that they're terrible at selling themselves and at marketing. And this is slightly off topic, but I know that that is part of your expertise. So what advice would you give to environmentalists in order to market themselves better?
I guess for us, the success has really been down to, some of the success has been down to technology and being able to connect with the right people. And if I'm brutally honest, although it's big corporate, the use of Facebook has been really good for us in terms of the plastic-free communities that are on there, but also in terms of targeting the right people with the right message. So I know people hate to think about it, but the amount Facebook knows about us is insane. So you can deliver your message directly to people of certain age brackets, what they're likely to buy, and all those sort of things, so that you're not wasting your time shouting to everybody, and you're delivering the message that those people want to hear directly to the right people. I think one of the things that hopefully will happen shortly is you have, I guess, there's really big vegan communities, really big vegan shows and things like that. And the plastic-free side of that hasn't developed to its full potential yet. And hopefully, at some point in the future, we'll have big plastic-free expos where people can go, and hopefully we'll be able to get manufacturers there and we'll be able to look at the latest kind of packaging. And I think there are a lot of people doing things in silos, doing their own thing without it all being joined together. We never all end up sat in a room talking about, and I'm sure there's lots we could do for each other and that we don't all know about. And so I guess one of the challenges to set the plastic community is to bring ourselves together, I guess, like as not a cooperative or a union, but something where everybody can share what everybody's doing, because that can only be good for all of us.
Great idea. Cogs whirring.
Challenge.
Yeah. So I don't know if you saw the article in The Guardian on Sunday about blue space and how the ocean and blue space has now been scientifically proven to be beneficial to our well-being and our mental health.
No, I didn't actually.
And this is something that it interests me, and obviously kind of I started off on this journey because of my passion for the ocean. Mm-hmm. So what does the ocean mean to you?
So, I mean, the ocean really, to me, so I live in Lancashire, so our nearest seaside, if you will, is Blackpool. So riding donkeys up and down the beach. But I absolutely love the wilderness of the ocean, I guess. So I love nothing better than going and renting a cottage in Northumberland where it's relatively unspoilt and just spending hours walking up and down the beach in the driving wind. You're not going to get deck chairs there. That's, to me, what I love about the ocean, the wilderness of it, I think.
Awesome. And Blackpool has played a big part in my life because my dad's actually from Chiltern in Manchester.
Okay.
And his parents, my grandparents, moved to Blackpool. So I spent a lot of my childhood wandering up and down the beach in Blackpool as a kid. I think my very first date was on the Tunnel of Love in Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Last question for you is, if you could invite 3 people for dinner, who would you invite, what would you talk about, and where would you go?
Okay, so I would invite David Attenborough, my granddad, and probably the Queen.
Awesome.
Which would be a really, really good party. We would go to probably my local pub, which is called the Almarin, which I went to on Sunday and just sat there by the fire all afternoon. It was wonderful, just a real buzz about the place. It's a proper country and looking out over the moors. There's a wilderness theme to all of this. It doesn't mean I hate people. And we would talk about, we'd probably just talk about David Attenborough's adventures, if I'm honest, and what he's seen in the world, because I think he could talk about that. It might be boring for him, but it wouldn't be for the rest of us.
And where would your granddad fit into that?
So he's just really good. Well, he's a huge inspiration to me anyway. When I was growing up, my mum used to say all the time, "You're just like your granddad," like it was a bad thing, and it was a big pat on the back for me. But he's just a really good conversationalist. Whenever we end up at family meals, we always end up sat next to each other, just talking about everything that's going on in the world, and he loves current affairs. So yeah, he'd keep the conversation going.
He sounds like a great granddad.
He is. He's fantastic.
So if people want to find the Modern Milkman, how do they find it?
So if you go to themodernmilkman.co.uk or on the App Store on Android or iPhone, just search for The Modern Milkman. You can download it there. Our contact details are all there, or you can message us on the Facebook page.
Thank you so much for listening. I really want this podcast to bring people together and to create an antidote for eco-anxiety, to inspire positive action and to create a wave of change. Please do help me to reach more people by reviewing and sharing with anyone who you think would benefit from the contents of this episode. And it does really help me to reach more people if you leave a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. Obviously, if you enjoyed the episode, and I'll love you forever if you do that. If you want to hear more, then please hit subscribe, and you can learn more about my ocean advocacy and my coaching by heading over to the clairetalksrubbish.com website page. Do take care until next time, keep talking rubbish and create a wave of change.